Welcome everybody to the Cutting Room in New York City. I'm Brad Tolinsky with BackStory Events, and we're being sponsored by Guitar World Magazine. If any of you guys want to check out, either you can check out on Guitar World's YouTube page, or you can check out on the Guitar World Facebook page. Anyways, we have a very special evening planned for you guys tonight. We have one of the very, very greatest jazz guitarists of all time with us today, Mr. Mike Stern. And we're here celebrating the release of his new album, his fantastic new record, Trip. We're going to be talking about it. And then after a while, Mike's going to play us a few songs from it. Anyways, I'd like to welcome Mike up onto the stage, and let's hear it for him. Good.
Good. Where am I supposed to sit?
Right here, and there's your mic.
Hello.
So anyways, I heard the new record, Trip. It's Trip, it's great, it's fantastic.
Thank you, man.
And there's an interesting story I know behind the title.
Yeah.
And maybe you could tell us a little bit why the record is called Trip.
Well, it's called Trip for just a whole bunch of reasons. It's kind of a very that title can mean a lot to a lot of people, including Timothy Leary, but we won't get into that. But
maybe we will.
Yeah, we will. But no, for me, I actually had an accident up about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, and I tripped. And I fell on some construction that wasn't supposed to be kind of in the middle of the street, and it was very camouflaged. And I thought, oh boy, I've lost my balance, and I'm gonna hit the other side of the street. Originally I wasn't moving very fast. I just kind of lost my balance, tripped on this thing, and then I tried to. As my body was going towards the other side of the street, I was trying to catch up to it, and so I hit pretty hard. And I thought, boy, I'm going to get badly bruised or something. Nothing's too serious, but unfortunately, the way I fell, it was a kind of a weird fall. I broke this bone, this humerus bone, not the shoulder, and this bone also. So it sucked. And this was really bad.
You broke both arms.
Both arms. And this was a clean break. So this hand is cool. This other hand was totally cool in the emergency room. And then a couple days later, and they didn't kind of tell me anything. They didn't fill me in on this part of it. But it's a very rare. But I got some nerve damage here.
Wow.
So, in order to play, I got an amazing doctor from who I wish I'd known about in the first place, but because somebody else kind of did this stuff with the shoulders and with the bones up here, but
when you went in for like the emergency or something, they probably worked on you right away.
Suggested another guy,
yeah.
And but this other guy that I found was from Wayne Krantz, who's an amazing guitar player, who said go to check out Dr. Barron. This cat, who's amazing. So he had to do some other kind of surgeries to get me so I can do a pinch, on this hand. So you can see the rest of it's kind of messed up.
Yeah.
I'm clawing my way to the middle, but so unfortunately, this happened, and it was. I'm very grateful to have checked, gotten to see him, because the other guy was a great surgeon, but didn't seem to know a lot about this. And this guy's a real hand and arm specialist. Anyway, so then I had to reinforce this with glue.
And I think what Mike means by this is his picking hand.
It's my picking hand, yes.
The fretting hand was cool, right?
This one was cool. I don't have to do a Django Reinhardt. I mean, God knows how he did that. But Django Reinhardt badly burned, and one of the greatest guitar players of all time, badly burned his hand and played with 2 fingers on his left hand and played fast as all hell. I don't know how the hell he did it, but spirit is everything. If you really want to do something, yeah, and if you got any chance of doing it, you just have to figure out how to do it. So I feel a little bit, it was weird. I feel a little bit like, Frankenstein, but it works.
So it was like numb or something? Is that
numb? Yeah, and kind of neuropathy, and it's nerve damage.
Right.
So some of it is coming back, and he's going to do something else coming up in January. But I was working 2 months after the accident, and this doctor said, go. He said, if you feel like you can do it, it's going to be weird mentally, because you're not going to be able to do some of the stuff maybe as easily as you used to. It's going to be different. You're going to have to find a way. And a lot of people might not go for that, but I said, let me give it a whirl.
I mean, I think this is like, it's a super inspirational story. So even though I don't want to completely dwell on it, I think it's sort of important because musicians, other musicians have probably run into these kinds of problems too, and they sort of need to hear it. So, I read about you playing with Chick, and this is like
shortly thereafter.
It was like 2 months after he went through this. But you tried to rig up something, didn't you?
Yeah,
like
at that point I was using a glove and some tape and all kinds of weird shit, and it didn't work as well, but it worked enough. And Chick was really sweet and letting me do the gig, and it worked. It was okay. So, and then I went on the road for like a month after that, and then shortly thereafter I got this other surgery so I could kind of move my thumb better. Because originally I had kind of a lower primate thumb, so now I have a higher primate thumb. I can't vouch for the rest of me, but but it works. And now he's going to do some other stuff coming up in January because I got a bunch of gigs until then. So the guy's amazing, and I'm glad to have found him.
Like, when this happened, like, where was your head at, like, psychologically?
That was hard. I mean, that was hard. And there's pain involved, physical pain. So psychologically, I was not in a good place, of course. But I got a lot of support from different people. It's not like the first rodeo I've been. I've had some stuff that happened before, where I had to go through some, getting sober for one thing, which is a huge thing. I've been sober for like 30 years now, a little over 30 years, and that's still,
Was it almost sort of a mixed blessing in the sense that maybe having to go through, like, getting sober sort of almost prepared you for having to deal with it?
Stuff like that, one thing prepares you for another, and everybody has stuff. Whether it's mental or it's emotional, or whether it's physical, or whether it's both at the same time, everybody's got stuff. And one thing for sure is you got to keep going. You just got to try to keep going however you can. That's definitely what I'm taking away from this, because that makes everything better. If you kind of give up, it makes everything a hell of a lot worse.
So your wife, Lenny Stern, who's a fantastic guitarist in her own right and actually plays on a couple of songs on Trip.
Yeah.
How did she respond? Was she helpful during this?
She's amazing, and she's a breast cancer survivor. That was about 30 years ago, and she went on the road when she was still on chemo. That was years ago. And she went on the road in Europe, and you got a wife like that, you can't wimp out. That's for damn sure. She'll kick my ass. So she was just understanding, but she was amazing, and always has been. We're married like 35 years, which is it's like pretty cool.
It sort of says something about the healing power of music. Everybody talks about the healing power of music.
It's for real.
And
there's no, you can't. I mean, it's all these things sometimes sound a little corny or whatever, but they're for real, and they are absolutely for real. I mean, music is boy, we need as much of it as possible nowadays, because it's the arts in general is kind of what makes you one of those things that make you want to live. It's the stuff that you want to. it makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. And so I can't overstate that. That for me, music has been just being able to play it, being able to listen to it. It's helped me in so many areas of my life.
So when did you say, I don't care, I may have this little problem, but I'm going to get back on the horse and I'm going to record again? Like, when did you?
That was
when
kind of
did you
right
decide?
away. I kind of decided I had to put off some. Originally, I was going to get Chick Corea on the record, and that was all kind of hooked up. And then this happened, so I had to do Plan B. So I kind of, a few months later, we recorded in January, and I got a bunch of great players, and they were all amazingly supportive, and played their asses off. So. How did it affect your playing, or how has it affected your playing? Is there any positives that came out of it? Sometimes there's positive stuff. You pick, you do a slightly different thing, note-wise or whatever. I mean, it's not a question. I'm not sure if that's a positive thing or just a thing that happens. But one thing that's very positive is you can make music, all kinds of music, and you don't have to be like the most technical. I've never thought technique was the first thing. The main thing for me is playing from the heart. I think B.B. King didn't have a whole lot of technique, but he sure reached me. You know what I mean? He wouldn't play a lot of fast notes, but what he played and where he played it in the music was really awesome. And a lot of those blues guys I've always loved. And Miles Davis, who I got a chance to play with for years, never had a ton of chops compared to like Freddie Hubbard, who was also amazing. I mean, take nothing away from Freddie Hubbard, who was another great trumpet player, but Miles used what he had, and sometimes it went up and down. At one point when I was playing with him, he had pneumonia, and he had a small stroke also, and he kept playing. And sometimes his chops weren't what they were, but he found other ways to get his heart out. And that's what music's about.
It's sort of interesting. I mean, there's some. I mean, you mentioned Django Reinhardt, who had a liability and turned it into an asset. And there's a famous story in the heavy metal world where, after he got his recording deal for the first Black Sabbath record, Tony Iommi was leaving the factory, and on the day he was leaving the factory, a stamp came down and chopped off the ends of two of his fingers.
Yeah.
And so he started detuning his guitar and doing all these different things to make it easier.
Found a way.
Created the sound in a way.
Yeah, you can. It makes you use the power of creativity, and yeah, I heard about that. There's other amazing stories. One of the drummers on this record, Trip, Lenny White, had some nerve damage, and a lot of people didn't know about it, but he was still playing with Chick Corea on Return to Forever, which is a very physical gig for him. I mean, he's a great jazz player, and he can play anything, but he's had, like, one of his arms is messed up from some kind of weird thing. It wasn't an accident, it was just something that happened. So he plays like this. He leans his, I think, kind of leans his forearm to play the snare drum against his leg. So it's pretty amazing. You find different ways. If you want to do it,
all I can say is
possibilities, but you got to do them. You got to go for it.
Listening to Trip, which I strongly urge everybody out there to do, like the song "Whatcha-Call-It." I mean, that's as fierce as probably anything that you've recorded.
Yeah.
Did it affect the way that you composed?
No, I mean, some of this I had written already, some of these tunes, but I had to tweak them as we got into the studios. I always like to record everything live as much as possible instead of doing it through cyberspace, kind of. Sometimes it's not possible, but most of the time I want that live stuff, because you change stuff up at the last minute if everybody's at the studio. And most jazz records are kind of recorded in 2 or 3 days, and then you tweak them later. It's not like you got a whole lot of time. So, and you want that kind of live thing, or at least I do for my recording. So so I had to tweak some stuff, compositionally, change the tunes around a little bit, but that I like that kind of aspect of it, and so some of these were written ahead of time, but I got a whole bunch of new tunes that I've been writing ever since that hadn't gotten in the way of any of that stuff at all.
When you compose, and you're sort of setting yourself up for to do improvisation, which
Right.
is you know
That's in
what,
the
what you
arrangement.
do in jazz.
Right.
So I was wondering, like when you wrote the songs on this record, or in general compose them, do you write changes that you know will challenge yourself?
Sometimes, and sometimes I write stuff that there's a really. I played with this band that called the Yellow Jackets. At one point, I got featured to play with them. An amazing band, and one of the saxophone player is Bob Mintzer, who's an incredible arranger and composer, phenomenal. And he always said, like, write stuff that you'll enjoy playing later. So sometimes I think about that. Sometimes I just go for the composition and find out, holy shit, this is hard to play. I don't know if I can even do this. I wrote it. And so, but most of the time, I'll try to play stuff that's not too challenging. Some of it I do, I push myself deliberately in the writing.
One of my favorite pieces on the record is a song called Screws, and it goes through so many different sort of mood changes and feels and shapes. Can you tell me a little bit about how that came to you, that particular song?
Well, I generally like to write so the stuff is arranged in a certain way that it'll kind of it'll be pretty obvious what another player should do in terms of their emotion. Then they can pick whatever notes, but it might be a louder part, you know what I mean, in the music, so they'll play louder. And that was with Wallace Roney, an incredible trumpet player. And it has a little Miles in the 80s. We were when I was playing with Miles, he was very much into more electric stuff then. Matter of fact, we were always trying to get him to play a little bit more bebop, more straight ahead, and he said, none of that stuff, that shit makes me feel old. But it was an amazing experience playing with him. He was great. I mean, of course, he always loved, Charlie Parker. He used to talk about that stuff all the time. But at that point, he wanted to do something different. So, playing with him was just an awesome experience. But yeah.
Scotch Tape and Glue was another song that I liked, and it was based on some classic changes, right?
Yeah, that's on Green Dolphin Street.
Right.
On Green Dolphin Street, it's a jazz standard. I like to do that. Charlie Parker used to do that a lot. Is take a standard tune, standard changes that a lot of people knew, and then just write a melody and maybe bass line. I'm not sure how much of a bass line he would write. I usually try to write the whole bass line, and then the vibe is markedly different from the way you'd play Green Dolphin Street, kind of. But then when we get into the playing, it can go in all kinds of different directions,
Is it important for you to, sort of pay homage to those roots, to have some connection on your records with the history or tradition of jazz?
Yeah, for me, I just love the music. I mean, I'm always checking out, like Sonny Rollins, or of course Miles, or John Coltrane, or McCoy Tyner, or just more traditional stuff, whether it be bebop, or Charlie Parker, whether it be bebop or post-bop or whatever, all that stuff I love. It's just very much in my heart. So it's always there, even when I'm rocking, there's some of those lines. Miles used to tell me, turn up and play like Hendrix. But what he really meant was just turn up, and play the way you play, because he really liked the fact there was a lot of bebop in my playing. So he liked that, but he wanted that attitude of kind of more loud stuff. And every time I try to play softer, he'd say, "Turn it up or turn it off." He told me one time. So that's what he was. We snuck in all kinds of moods with him anyway. And he was always very open to different stuff. And you know, he'd have a loose concept and let people do what they wanted to do within that concept. So it was very
Did you
cool.
see the Cheadle film?
The Miles film.
Yeah, the Miles
The
film.
thing about, you know, a couple of people told me don't see it. I haven't seen it yet. I'm sure it'll be great, but Miles was not a gangster. Like I heard they depicted him like that. I mean, we were all kind of in those days. You know, there was a whole lot of better living through chemistry.
Semi-gangster stuff going on.
Yeah, there was all that stuff. So you kind of got into that world, you know, even by accident. But he was not like that at all. When you know, they broke the mold when they made Miles Davis. When the Mary Tyler Moore show was taken off the air, he got pissed off. That was his favorite show. I mean, he was just a different character. He was never, you know, he'd hire whoever he wanted to hire, no matter who said what, you know, no matter what, if they, you know, sometimes back in the day there was a little bit of flack if you hired, you know, apparently Jim Hall, the great jazz guitar player, white guy, was hired by Sonny Rollins, and he got a little pushback, Sonny, to why you hiring that guy, you know, even though Sonny thought it was amazing. They made up afterwards, but he kind of didn't do the gig for long. Miles, there was none of that. I mean, he just said, "Motherfucker can play." So that was it. That was all. They kind of broke the mold when he. So that movie is one small side of him. He was a sweetheart.
You know, the movie does exaggerate sort of the wild stuff, but the takeaway from it was that I felt, anyways, when I was watching it, that look, he's going to do whatever he needs to do in order to preserve his own music.
Yeah. Well, that's for sure. He definitely did that.
So you were pretty young when all that was going down. I mean, did he terrify you, or was he always cool? I mean, what was your personal relationship with
He
him?
was really cool with me for a long time, and then he changed the band, and also I was getting really messed up in those days, so much so that I was like, you know, even Miles was worried about me. That's how high I was getting. That's when you know you got a Jones. And so he actually was going to pay to put me in a rehab. He actually, I mean, that's the kind of guy he was. It was a real sweet character, you know, and he said, I'll put you up there with Truman Capote was up there, and it's up, you know, up in Montauk. And I said, no, man, I'm cool. You know, I just wasn't ready to cool out. So I left the gig and played with Jaco Pastorius, and from the frying pan and definitely into the fire. And then Jaco we were really tight. And then I came back with Miles. Miles asked me to. I played with Dave Sanborn also. And then Miles heard that I got sober. He called me back. And he used to call me Fat Time, and because I weighed pretty heavy, and he liked my time feel. And there's actually a tune called Fat Time with a long guitar solo on it on the comeback album, Man with a Horn. When had been in retirement, and he came back, and he actually called it Fat Time. I was really honored. But when I came back after getting sober, and he said. He said, oh, you know, I lost a lot of weight. He said, oh, no more Fat Time, huh? So he said, okay, time. That's what he called me from then on out, time. But the band was different, so it wasn't, I didn't have as much fun, but it was still a great band. And it was just time for me to try to do my own thing. So I lasted another year or so, and then it was, but it was an incredible experience. I mean, all the people that I've gotten a chance to play with, and some of the musicians that I get a chance that, you know, sometimes in jazz you don't have the same band all the time. You change cats up a lot because people are different, doing different things, or you want to just try to change some different stuff for different tours. All those people I'm so grateful to have played with. I mean, they all basically kicked my ass. You know, they're really awesome players, and that's so it's very inspiring. and then all the people that I've gotten a chance as a sideman to play with, I never thought that would ever happen, you know, and so I'm all very grateful for all that.
Well, Mike has, I think this is your 17th record. He has a deep catalog and a lot of amazing music. And if you dig the stuff that you hear tonight, you should definitely go back and listen. But I'm sort of wondering now, after you've led your own bands and you've, gone through your own journey and you're older and wiser, maybe. I'm wondering if you look back
older for sure. I don't know
if
about wiser.
You look back at that experience with Miles as a band leader, and do you have a new perspective on it? Do you think about that and said, "Oh, I get that now"? Is there something?
For sure. And I kind of got it then. I mean, how he was leading the band. We thought he was a little crazy at first, but then we kind of figured out right away that he liked to have a loose concept and kind of basically form it as we were playing, and it would get tight, and then he'd kind of change it up, actually. So that was just his way. So, and I have a lot of respect for whatever he did. I mean, he was so amazing in changing his music and what he started off with, what he kind of went through with. Kind of Blue was a very traditional, amazing record, and then he did Bitches Brew, and then he did all these other, more different kinds of records, and kept his own voice. It's really funny, like some of the stuff he would play while we were vamping, on a funk kind of vamp. You could take that stuff out and put it on a rhythm changes tune from back in the day. It's almost like it was the same kind of vocabulary, it was the same kind of swinging, it was the same kind of feel, and it just worked. And so he was something else. He was something else.
This kind of sets up the next question a little bit, which is, there's a lot of great sort of like funky bop stuff on the new record, but you also, I mean, if you listen to songs like, Amelia or I Believe You, I mean, they're these beautiful sort of pop songs almost, just they have that McCartney-esque thing or even a wistful sort of an Americana folk. Where does that fit in with your jazz experience?
I've always dug it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've always dug, in terms of, different kinds of music. It's just like whatever gets my heart, So sometimes, I used to really I still do Bob Dylan, of course, the way he sings is not what you'd consider trained, but it's beautiful. It's got so much soul, And then of course a lot of folk music. I've always dug some country stuff. I dig, and it was really great playing with Miles or Jocko because they helped me kind of reinforce that kind of wide palette of music. Whatever gets your heart. Don't write down anything. Don't say no to anything. Because all of it's great. World music. Some of that stuff has world music influence too, and that I get from my wife, from Lainey, because she's been in Mali and in Senegal, and she does this African stuff now. She's got a really cool trio with two guys from Senegal, Loon Faye, who's on the record, and the bass player Mamadou Bai, who's a badass bass player, and they have a trio. They both they're from Senegal, but they both live in New York, and so some of that world stuff, I hear her playing it all the time, and so around the house, and we play all the time around the house. We decided not to go on the road too much together because we'd rather stay married, and that's worked out for 35 years. But it's a ball to hear her. She's been a big influence. So I try to let as much stuff in as possible, and so some of it comes. And I like some pop music. I like Beatles and the Stones, of course.
You talk about Miles sort of in any context, like he picks up the trumpet and it's immediately identifiable as him. But in some ways, the same could be said about you. I mean, I hear your playing and actually the tone of your guitar, and I know immediately who it is. I mean, you've got your fingerprint, and you know your setup isn't terribly conventional. Like I was curious, how did you find your guitar, or how did your guitar find you?
Well, I used to. I had for a jazz guitar player, it was really different, especially when I was doing it. But it was a Telecaster guitar, which was more of a rock guitar, you know, or a country guitar. And this guy, Roy Buchanan, amazing guitar player, who I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I used to hear him. And he was a badass blues player and rock player. And then Danny Gatton, who was another guy in D.C., amazing, neither
monster.
one of, yeah, incredible. And he was just, actually at that point, he was just fixing guitars. No one really knew about him. He was kind of shy and just, he was a guitar repairman. And I heard him play one time at a little club, and I went, holy shit. I mean, he was amazing, you know, this cat. Country licks and bebop licks and everything, you know, just amazing. And so one point, I got to know him a little bit. At one point, he fixed one of my guitars, and then one point he came up to me and said, "I got to buy a used car, so I need $500, and you know, I've got a great guitar." It used to be Roy Buchanan's guitar, and it was Roy's old guitar, and I bought this Telly that was really awesome. It got ripped off in Boston. Somebody pulled a gun on me, so it got ripped off at a bus station. He had as I don't like to say, but as is very true, the guy had a persuasive argument. So
Damn that Joe Perry.
I had to give it up. And then there was somebody else in Boston, a luthier guitar builder that used to see me play, and saw that guitar, and he had already built something like that. And so I got that guitar. Then Yamaha said they wanted to do a Mike Stern model, so they did this Yamaha Mike Stern, my Yamaha Pacifica Mike Stern model, the Telly style guitar that it sounds great to me, and it sounds really full. So it's kind of heavy. It's almost like a Les Paul, which are very heavy guitars, but it sounds warmer that way, which I always like, a kind of a warm sound. And so I'm a jazz guitar player that uses a Telly pretty much, because I like to rock too. So I used to have a fatter guitar, but it used to feed back a lot. Yeah. So this kind of has worked for me, and if it works, I usually try not to fix it. You know what I mean?
Without getting too nerdy too, but I have to ask you about, you know, it's the guitar sound plus sort of this chorusy kind of sound that you use, and I was wondering first sort of how you produced it, like what you used to produce that, and second sort of what attracts you to that chorusy
the
sound.
main thing, well, it's called an SPX 90. It's this old thing or 92. It's one of the two things that has this kind of pitch change thing. It's not really a chorus, so it sounds better than a chorus. So to me, and it has this kind of airier sound than just going through an amp for me. I kind of like just sometimes straight up going through one amp, but I like two amps, and I kind of like a more vocal sound. I've always been into it. I tell sometimes students to sing what they play, you know, because it'll come more from here. And guitar should sound more vocal. I think you can bend strings, even as a jazz player. You know, you can get it happening more vocal in a more vocal way. And also, I like horn lines. I transcribe a lot of more than other guitar players. I listen to horn players, and because they have air coming through, and their lines are beautiful. So I try to get some of that stuff. Piano players too, I check out. You know, other instruments other than my guitar, but the main idea is to get a more vocal sound, kind of less not some pick noise, but not so much. I try to get more of a like you're singing, and so that helps. That's kind of why I think people go for the sound in their head. You know what they hear. Some people don't want that or don't need that, and some people it's not their main priority. You just try to go for what you go for. All of it's cool to me. If you have a million pedals or if you have nothing, it's all good. As long as you try to get the heart is the main thing. How you play from the heart. Music's a language, and it's a language of the heart for sure.
Well, before we have Mike play some music for us, I'd like to see if there's anybody out there in the audience that has any questions for him. Anything else? Right over there. Hang on, somebody with a microphone. I'll come over. We actually need to have you say it on mic.
Yeah, because we're all deaf. We're guitar players. I'm reading your lips, actually.
Can you talk a little bit about your vocalizations? How that came about?
Yeah, that's a cool question. My wife does that. She sings, and also I was somebody who's on this record, Giovanna Marotti. I think that's how she pronounced her name. She's actually singing on this record also, and I'm singing on this record on one tune. And she, a long time ago, she kind of overdubbed some stuff on a record that I had already done called Give and Take. It's with Jack DeJohnette and John Patitucci, and it was more of a straight-ahead record, but it had some ballads that she wrote words to and sang, and she gave me the CD with her recording against the music that was already recorded, and I thought, wow, that's really beautiful. Then some years later, I had met Richard Bona, a great bass player from Cameroon and amazing singer, and so I did a record with him called Voices, and some other vocalists were on there also. And he heard me kind of messing around singing some of the tunes. I was showing him, well, this is what I want on this tune, and I didn't have to tell him much. He's awesome. This cat is ridiculous, but he liked my singing, so he encouraged me to try to sing. So I started doing that a little bit and actually singing along with what I play sometimes, But it's something that I've always done, it turns out. I mean, I kind of know that's, not so much just kind of under my breath, kind of singing along some of the lines that I play. And like I said, that vocal sound is something that I've always just liked. I think I started off when I was real little kind of singing around a house, and my mom knew that I wanted to do something musically, so she got me. She was a piano player. She is a piano player still, a little bit, not professional, but she plays Bach around the house and some classical stuff and a little bit of jazz. And so she kind of got me piano lessons when I was little, because she knew I wanted to do something. And I was always singing a little bit along with the piano too. And so it's been part of my whatever. It's been part of what I do. And then when I kind of decided, because she had suggested piano, that kind of killed that for me right away. I wanted to do my own thing. So when I picked up the guitar, I just got hooked on it. By the time I was 11 or 12, I was just into it, But I was always kind of singing along, So that vocal sound that I'm looking for, and then just the singing has been part and parcel of whatever I do, so. Anybody else? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep, me. With rock guitarists, a lot of times, they're switching guitars every song, and you've tended to stay with the same equipment and the same sound. I was wondering if that was because you're informed primarily by horn players or by jazz, where that's not as common. I'm just curious if you've ever thought about experimenting with different types of guitars, different types of sounds, different pedals, that kinds of thing, or whether you feel that just having that signature sound identifies you no matter what song you're playing on.
It's not so much a conscious decision. I think whatever the signature sound is, I think everybody has that. They just need to develop it more, maybe. Everybody has their own voice, just like we all have our own voices, when you speak. But, and writing really helps. As soon as I started writing more, I got more of my own kind of sound on the guitar even. But But I've never wanted to have a bunch of guitars. Like I want to spend more time just learning new vocabulary. So I'm trying to do that and trying to change maybe articulation, maybe a couple of pedals. But I try to keep it pretty, that the variety would be in the writing and the way I might approach it and where it would, you know, how I would play a certain tune. But I know some other people that have, I did some stuff with Lee Ritenour, and he took a few guitars on the road, and it was beautiful. He would have one jazz guitar, one kind of Les Paul, I think it was a Les Paul for the rock sound, and then an acoustic guitar, a Yamaha actually. It was a silent guitar, is what they call a silent guitar with no body on it, but it sounds really great actually. They've got a nylon string guitar. I might do that, the nylon string. The other reality is it's really hard to get everything on a plane, you know, and you don't want to check them under the plane because you may as well kiss the guitar, or, you know, goodbye. So, and I'm on the road a lot. But I don't, even if that was easier, I would still probably opt to just use one guitar, primarily anyway.
I actually have one more question, I thought. I love Eric Johnson. He's a friend.
He's awesome.
He's awesome. I just wonder how the hell you were able to get him to record a record in a couple of weeks instead of a couple of years.
Oh, it was, you know, it wasn't that hard of a push. I just kind of told him, you know, we were playing, and like one point there was one tune that we did of mine. This was on this project I did with Eric Johnson. It was, you know, Eric Johnson, Mike Stern. The record was called Eclectic, and because we're of the same mind, we like a whole bunch of stuff. He's a very good jazz player also, and of course he can rock his ass off, and he plays great blues and all kinds of other stuff. So, but at one point he was listening to one tune, and he said, "Man, I sucked on that. I don't like that." I said, "Wait. Just turn up the cymbal a little bit." You know, and we turned on. It was Anton Fig was playing on this cut, and all of a sudden oh, that's not bad. And then by the end of it, he really dug it. It was just, you know, he just needed a little. And I understand that it's really hard to be objective. And he was producing the record, but it's really hard to be objective if you're self-critical at all, which most musicians are, most people are actually. It's very hard to be objective. And if you're looking at your own stuff, you know, and generally you're more critical than you need to be. And some of the best stuff is the stuff that just happens on the first or second take. With you know, a couple of mistakes, who cares? I did this that tune Fat Time with Miles, and I wanted to do it again. And Miles said, "No, it's good." And I said, "Chief, can't I do it again? I can do it better." He said, "Fat Time, when you're at a party, you gotta know when to leave." It's a great line. Yeah.
Well, we'd love to hear you play a little bit now.
All right.
I think that
Great.
would be a
Cool.
fantastic way to wrap this
and
up.
this friend of mine right here, Edmund Gilmore, we play a lot together, and he's a badass bass player. So he's going to do most of the playing. I'm just going to watch him.
We'll be back in a second.
Thank
Mike
you.
Stern, thanks.
Thanks.
Fantastic.
Man. Thanks, Bill.